do a real quick talk on something real fast. If you go to Answers in Genesis and you see Dr. Nathan Jensen's interesting video, Where Did Ancient Native Americans Come From, with Dr. Nathan Jensen, he makes a conclusion that I just want to talk about real fast. That he says that the Q group, right? A group that known in genetics is said to be one of the dominant lineages in the Americas. He says that it got to the Americas about AD, right? 300 to 600 AD. Now, I want to talk about something real quick. Now, I was doing a couple different things. I just wanted to, just with my free time, talk about something real fast. Real fast. I'm going to just show something real fast. A fossil. So I'm going to show two fossils. And I want to talk about something while I'm opening this note real fast. That also mtDNA, you know how Jensen also tries to change the chart with the Y-DNA? I know where he gets that from. There's also different designs with mtDNA. For example, a lot of people in the Out of Africa design would say that everyone came from L groups. Well, if you know about the find of Isham, it's a very important fossil because it also, Isham has the K group that makes pretty much me and many other people, right? It makes R groups, it makes Q groups, it makes N groups, it makes O groups, it makes S groups, it makes many other groups. And what's important is that that group also has an mtDNA of R. That R group is actually found out that the mutation rate of it actually shows. Let me just read this. It says the existing mtDNA polygeny tree has exactly the same problems as the existing Y tree as discussed above. I'll talk about something later with this. Based on previous defined mtDNA haplotypes, right? With all these things. Let me just make the conclusion what it is. So remember how I talk about that? Two lines of evidence suggests haplogroup R, right? mtDNA R has the ancestor of all modern haplogroups. So what is it saying? It's saying that the R that's found in Isham actually shows that it makes L3. That automatically, by Isham being up in Russia, Siberia, that makes every single person out of Africa, right? But we know that. But what I'm having a conversation on is about Q. But let me show you something real fast on Q. This is why I talk about this. Can geneticists really tell you historical information? Remember, a geneticist knows genetics. They don't know, they're not historians, right? They're not master crafters or prophets. Work with physical data. We have to work with that too. So if we're gonna work with, let's look at fossils. So let me show you something real fast. Okay, so we have a Q. We have different Qs in different places, but I want to show you a Q that exists in a time frame that I think it wouldn't make any sense to say they have not been in America BC time. Let me just show something real fast so I can close it up for you. Everything likes to do a little lag while I'm online, but that's okay. I can scroll and find it. I'm gonna just point out to a line that's in the U.S. That's a fossil. Excuse me. That's a fossil, and not just a fossil. I'm gonna show you another paper because I just want to show something real fast. Because if we're talking fossils, this is what I'm trying to say, is that not every geneticist has every fossil paper ever printed. They have a data sheet of how things are made, but not the fossils. My bad. I must have scrolled too far. Actually, was supposed to look right here because I gotta go to the one in America. There's a lot of different fossils in different places and stuff, but the ones in America are kind of interesting. You gotta go to the data. You can't just look at who are all tested in modern people. You gotta look at the fossils. So here is one in the USA, ancient USA. This would be in the area of New Mexico. So this would be a long time ago right here. You can see right here. Getting a look here. And I'm just going to go over. So you can see this is going to be what we'll see. And let me see what we have here. So this one will be more of a CT lineage. That will be about BC. We'll say that's about 880 time frame. We'll say this one's an early one. And that's true. Sometimes they do have early finds. But let's keep looking here to get a look here, because we want to look at the fossils. As I go up here, this goes deeper into the fossils. So that one's US. We'll go up a little more to another one that's in the US. That one's not so old. These ones are going to be the older ones as I go up. All right, so here it is. This is a C. Oh, no, this is Q. All right, let me zoom in. This is the fossil I was talking about. This one's in US. This one would have a mtDNA of D right there and a Y chromosome of Q right there. So there's a Y chromosome, that's the mtDNA. And I'm going to go over to the year of it. It's going to be here in Montana. And this will be BC. This will be BC time frame. This will be about 12,000 years ago. This will be about 10,000 BC. Now, obviously, like we all understand, we know that the biblical narrative is true, but we can't say that this is going to be an AD time frame. Now, also, let's look at another paper. Let's look at something else. And I already went over this. I'll put this in the description afterwards. But here, let me show you something. So there's an ancient person by an ancient name, right? I don't know how you say it, Kennewick man. And they found them, right? It was something that they found in America, in Washington State, USA, right? 1966, they found it, right? And they carbon dated it. Now, this is the thing about carbon dating. We understand that the carbon itself, right? We know that when they try to estimate that the carbon came from the stars exploding, all that stuff and whatnot, we know that when the flood happened, we know a lot of carbon came out of Earth, because we know most carbon is inside the Earth. 90% of the carbon is inside the Earth, scientifically. So we also understand if they date these things, yes, they will show astronomical numbers. That makes sense. But we can't just say that this finding is not BC time frame, right? We can't say this is AD time frame. And what this is, let me just show you what I'm showing you here, right? Let me just show you what group this is, make it clear. Right here, it'll just talk about the mitochondria genome sequence, just talk about what it got and everything. It got haplogroup X2A and Y DNA QM3. So the conclusion is, are we just going to believe when geneticists talk and just publish a book as if that book that's published is actually a actual published paper, a peer-reviewed paper with many other geneticists that reviewed it and went over it together? Because remember, we're talking about a project that one person can't do this thing. It's like saying take all the stars and count the stars to show me which ones were set in order in this area. Now, we know that everyone has different trainings in different fields. But if I tell you to put them to the names of the ancient names that God originally put them as, that's a different story. Because when we're linking haplogroups to peoples, the complexity complexes. It complexes. And we got to look at fossils to be able to tell it. Look at some of Jensen's work. He doesn't talk about a lot of BC time stuff. He talks a lot of AD time stuff, or stuff that's around the time of, I would say, like 1000 BC, around that time frame. And then note the historical sources that he's using. Is he using actual historical documents to back his stuff up? Or is he just saying, well, because they're found here, they must be this? You got to look at these things more careful, because what I'm showing you is fossils. These are actual fossils, and there's a lot of people that run into problems like this when it comes to this part of the book. Let me show you something real fast, just for the sake of thought. I'm just doing this because this is something that I've seen coming to the community of believers. It was something that was going to manifest more and more because it's actually important. It's actually important to know because it said in the book that even Messiah came not just by water but by blood. That blood being from Judah, right? From the woman of Mary, right? That's very important, right? Because we could actually get a good understanding of that very simply because a woman has an X chromosome from her mother and an X chromosome from her father. Let me just show you something real fast. I'm going to show you something that's going to be kind of different, and it might not be something that at first when I show you, it might not make sense, but let me just put something here and just show it. I was just looking at some studies on ancient animals. You know, what's interesting is if you note, animals also have different haplogroups and stuff like that. And remember, God, he makes all animals. He makes everything, right? He says he knows everything. He knows all the creatures. So it makes sense that when he structures, they should have a difference. What's interesting is if you look at creatures from today to their ancient predecessors, for example, this paper, it's just looking at the basically mitogenomes suggest a stable mitochondrial clades of basically, remember that area that I was talking about where humans first came from Siberia and Russia? When I talk about where Isham was and stuff like that, you can note if we note that, remember, creatures existed in the beginning, and then there was many times, no one can deny this, that creatures were wiped out. And we know that by the biblical narrative, many creatures were wiped out and brought to a bottleneck of just a few creatures. Now remember, what's important, we're not just going by twos. Though we read some parts of the biblical narrative, it says 2 by 2s. But if we look careful, right, if we go to scripture, there is an order to the good animals, right? Remember how he says about the good animals, how they'll be paired? He says something very special about the good animals, right? Let me actually go to that real fast. Right here, it says this: of every clean beast you shall take to you by sevens, right? By sevens, the male and his female, and the beasts that are not clean by 2. So you take the clean beasts by 7s, and you take the unclean beasts or some other ones by 2s. You can see of the fowls also of the air by 7s and different ones like that. So some by 7s and some by 2s, right? Some 2, some 7, right? But the reason why I'm saying that is because, remember, he's keeping the species. He's not making a new species. He's keeping the ancient species from before. So from the species today, we should show evidence of ancient species. Now, you know what's interesting about that? Deers are not also, obviously they're not humans, but we can know something interesting. What I want to show you here is basically just a design where they took all the animals that had migrated, because this is what I was also going to talk about, that it looked like the people apparently landed about here on Mount Ararat or Mount Judy, and they moved all the people, and even what's interesting is all the people basically moved around this area of these continents. They moved up here, they went over here, and some went over here into these areas. They just like spread very quickly all over. When it says in the scriptures, right? There's a part in the scriptures that says this. It says, right after the flood, God blessed Noah, right? And he says, be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth. Now, replenish the earth, does that necessarily mean that the whole earth has to be exactly wiped out, right? Now, it already talks about that in the scripture when everything's all wiped out and everything, all that. But we also got to understand that replenish can also talk about to go and dominate and destroy all other species. Now, the reason why I say that, because other people got their other conclusions when it comes to Neanderthals and Denisovans. They think that obviously, since they show evidence that they lived around people, they think that they was an off species that was wiped out by people. That could be like in the wild or something like that. I believe more so that they were people already wiped out by the time that the people got there. though they show evidence by the mixing. I'm going to talk about that mix real fast. Now, first, let's look at these animals. Now, it's going to show animals from millions of to about right here. You can see 9,000 BC, things like that. And also, I'm calling brothers who are having conversations on these things. I want to have a conversation on these things because I think these things are very, very deep and very important. But let me show something here real fast. So you see this chart right here? What you're seeing here is different species of this deer from 12.5 million years old to about time frames that I was talking about to 1,000 years and things like that. I'm gonna be real fast, so I'm gonna kind of speed through, not too fast, but give an understanding. You see what I'm showing you here? What if you look in the red here, right? What it basically expresses that they have ancient finds. Their ancient finds is in the red right here, in the red. There's 4 of them in the red, and you'll see them issued right here. It'll talk about it. Our ancient samples are such and such and such and such. And they fall into these type of haplogroups. They make them. They call them haplogroup D, C, A, and whatnot, and all that. They talk about the specimens that they have, D, C, A. They know that they fall into the ones that they have here. But let's look at this real fast. This is actually a tree of the whole family of the deers. What's interesting is if you note here, it has a root and it has all the way to here. And it's saying that the ancient finds that they have are some of the modern finds of the deers that they have today. And they say, if you look closer, it almost looks like, branches of stems of groupings that they can be grouped in. You can kind of group them as P1, P2, and P3. So you can kind of put these in these little groups, these separate families. And you can note that there's older ones that would be wiped out, right? What's interesting is the same design of this tree. If you look closely on the family tree, and I'm talking the whole family tree, not just the modern people, but all the way to the Denisovans and everything, you'll get a similar tree. This tree is actually similar. This is going to be basically rooting all the way to the Denisovans, to the Neanderthals and everything. And then at the top, you can see modern humans. This was a study from Dirk Cave when they was basically looking into the mixture of the Neanderthals and everything. And they found basically this understanding. That was in 2020. Any papers before 2020, don't even look at them when it talks about comparison of peoples. 2020 is when they first sequenced the actual Neanderthal DNA at Dirk Cave. So that's actually very important because it actually let us know that this way that they were linked, the way that these ancient humans are linked to us. So if you look here, you can see there's a stem that stems off like this, but there would be an ultimate root right here that would root. Modern humans would be different than Neanderthals, right? I don't mean to hold it like that, but that thing had popped out like that. Let me go back up. Modern humans are different than Neanderthals, right? But they're still human, right? But we got to note the way things are connected, how humans are connected, from the ancient roots of humans, from the way that they are, right? But you can see right here. So modern humans will be one stem, and Neanderthals, Denisovans, that's just, remember, those are just names that people give to those humans, ancient humans or peoples before, that they don't know their name individually, so they name them a group that they can group them in. But things are getting more complex, especially when you're looking at this. So these go their own way, these go their own way, and there's a root. There'll be a root lineage. I gotta stop holding this thing like that. There's a root lineage, right? There's a root lineage that's basically allowing us to understand that there is going to be a root. And if we go here, we can note the same thing. So that the species that we found over here, they stem off and have a more recent group, right? Modern group, a more modern group. And then you'll have these out groups, these older groups, right? These older species that we go on. You can also note that if you look at a circular graph of humans, you can note that will be a root lineage, and then you'll have different lineages that will be making their own lineage, right? It's very complex. It's very complex. And to put it biblically, I know that these is the fossils to relate them to a species, right? We can see nodes. We can see the nodes. You see those blue circles? Those are called nodes or clades, or a family group. What a lot of times, if you relate it to how the biblical narrative is, you can relate it to a branch of one family, like Ham, Shem, or Japheth, right? You can see, in fact, this will have 3 nodes, 1, 2, 3. Obviously, this is not Ham, Shem, or Japheth, but we can note nodes. So we can actually demonstrate that major nodes to note. And one of the nodes that we can note in time, throughout all time, we can note roots. So that's all I'm saying, is that roots get deep. And this paper that I was showing right here with the female DNA, I'll put other stuff in the description later and whatnot. I don't know where is that. It's probably on here somewhere. I'll have to find it somewhere here. But what I'm saying is that fossils get deep. Fossils get deep. And I'm just saying, if he's saying on that same paper that I was showing you that the Q was 10,000 years old, on this same paper when I was showing you that the Q group that was in America 10,000 years ago, and that other paper right here that was saying that the Q group was in the lands of America, at least BC time frame is what it's saying. If we're saying that Q was not in America at least 10,000 years ago, then E cannot be African. The E group cannot be African because every E group in Africa has to be younger than Isham. How do we know? Because Isham has the R group that makes L3, and L3 is found to mix with R group, RY DNA before they get into the lands of Africa. We know this because we can go over different fossils that we found. Let's go one more. I'm just going to show one more real fast. And I'll go over these things later because I actually got to run somewhere real fast. That's why you see the batteries going low and whatnot. But let me just show a quick fossil just to show you what I mean. That L3 mixed with R groups before it mixed with E groups, right? And most likely they came from R. The mixtures of these things, it gets crazy. But let me show you something, right? This is that L3 build note, obviously always having the resources on there. But before L mixes with over here in Poland, right, we can note that this R group mixed with a L3. So this is going to be where, let me actually not right here. This is something else that I was looking at, which I found out that some interesting things with that Shroud of Turin thing. I'll talk about that later maybe. But I'm going to go to the actual paper with the little fossils. Let me just show it real fast right here. So it's a paper about a massive migration from the steppe, right? The steppe is like basically above the Caucasus Mountains, around, Russia, things like that, around that area and whatnot. And it talks about basically there was a massive migration there. And there was a lot of things that happened. Let me just see if I can pull this thing up real fast and just show you something real fast. So a lot of people know about the corded ware, right? Corded ware culture complexity uncovered using, obviously, looking into things in Poland and whatnot. This is going to be Poland. This is going to be a long time ago. Now, you got to look at, for him, if no one can say this is not BC, you can't say this is not BC because you can look at corded ware culture. You can look at the culture and find out that they were BC time frame. They don't have the stuff that we have later on. They're BC time frame and the stuff that they have. But let's look what's there. The Y DNA is R1b, but look at the mtDNA that's with that R1b, L3. So what's important is that this is going to be BC time frame in Poland. This is undebatable evidence that we have to look a little closer into these things. We can't go with the world's first view. We need to look at fossils because a lot of times the stuff that was coming out was because of racism, and whether people like that sound or not, that fact, it is what it is because that is exactly what eugenics is, and that's where that concept came from. A lot of people don't even put that part together and think that they did find fossils. They didn't. The fossils are now starting to reveal it modernly. But I have to take off. So This is what I'm showing. These lineages, that's a mtDNA L3 that's found in these ancient ones in times that obviously are BC time frame. This is like what 5,000 years ago, something around there. I will give you a more pinpoint number right here. So 5,000 years ago, 3,000 BC. So you can see what's going on there. So when you're getting a picture at all these things, I think you need to look at fossils. I think we need to show sources and fossils and talk about historical documents and put these things together and really talk about what we have here. Because I think it's more complex than just taking one geneticist or one historian or one person or just a few people saying this is what it is. But we need to come together and have a holy conversation on these things with actual fossils, because the fossils won't lie; they'll tell you. So that's what I'm concluding, is that you gotta look a little deeper in these things, and also I'm calling certain individuals to have a conversation. Two that I want to have a direct conversation directly. Let me just show which two. The one who basically reviewed the book Trace right here, Creation Myths. I would have loved to have a conversation with this one. I thought some of the time, I put some time points there. I thought some of the things that he said was very interesting. I believe that he is saying the truth, that he himself says also that Jensen says R1b, just recently, because we know R1b actually started around Russia and it moved and migrated into the area of the British area. We know this because there's all types of culture that contest of it, right? Even that Cordic culture that I was just showing, and all types of culture. And we know that they moved from one area to another. So we know that that's true, but the time that Jensen dates it as is way too late. He's dating it way too late when it was much, much more early. It's way BC time is when certain things happen. And what he does with E1B1B and E1B1A is just ridiculous. The only E1B that you can find is in a Natufian time frame. So that though the easiest route, the fastest route to anywhere is a straight line, doesn't necessarily mean that it's always a straight line. And historical documents will attest to that. We can talk about stuff from 18 BC, historical documents that will talk about how people were migrating. That would be more better than just say, well, since this is what the genetics say, this is what they must be. We gotta look at the genetics and the historical documents. For example, the Sea Peoples invasion, right? The complexity of the Sea Peoples invasion, the complexity of the Turkish invasion, the complexity of the barbarian invasion, the complexity of invasions, right? The complexity of enslavements, right? Enslavement isn't just in the last 100 or 1,000 years, right? It was going on many times, right? The Assyrians enslaving the Arameans and all types of things like that going on, right? In all different times. Also, this person, Jungle Jargon. I know that you have a view that J are Jews. Obviously, that's going against what the Trace is talking about. Both of these have reviewed Trace, right? They're not big pages, but they do have some very deep thoughts on these things, and I think that's very interesting. So I would love to have a conversation, because this is why I'm trying to have a conversation with people, intellectual individuals that do look into these things and have an understanding of the biblical narrative, because I do believe that this can be understood, but I don't think it can be understood if people don't come together. I think they need to show what they found, right? Because it's like that. That's how complex the thing is, that we have to actually show the fossils, right? Show the route, show the movements, not just say this is where they are, but show a haplogroup by name that haplogroup, show where they are in the time frame they are, match it with historical documents. It's not as easy as just doing genetics. You gotta also look into historical documents. You have to. Even Jensen shows it that he had to look into the Turks. At first he said he didn't even know about J origin until he looked into the history of the Turks, which we also know the history of the Turkish J lineage. There's a lot of Turkish men who are honest about who they are, right? That's just something that's true. But I would love to have a conversation about these things, as these things are very interesting. So with that, family, I got to take off. But I wanted to express that these things are sometimes deeper than many people know. I think people should know about the fossils of GHIJK, HIJK, and IJK, which are one persons. But I digress. Let me go with that, family. If you have any questions before I take off, say them now before I leave. But summary, what I was talking about, I'm just saying look into things a little more deeper. Like I was talking about with the female DNA and everything, the mitochondrial DNA. Let me see if I can find it real fast. Maybe right here. If not, I don't know. I'll find it a little later. Because I don't think this. But you've seen it. I just showed it when we was talking. So the mtDNA, the way that the mtDNA breaks, it might be that R actually makes all L groups. It might be that R actually makes all L groups with mtDNA. And with Q groups, you just seen it. We have fossils and other papers that confirm at least BC time frame. The culture, the actual culture, you can look at the actual culture and what they have around them and things like that. And obviously, the E1, B1 groups got to get looked at a little more closer with fossils. And there's evidence of L lineages outside of Africa. Also, another thing, I do not like how Jensen also, when there's a video that he does. Let me just point this out real fast because I wanted to make sure I point this out before I close this. I told myself I was going to point this out at least when he goes over this. I got to at least point this thing out real fast before I take off. And I'm sorry if the sound went out or anything like that, because I know sometimes on my phone it misbehaves, so I'll note that later. But let me show you something with this video. I would love to break this little video down, but let me just express something real fast that I think is just confusion. Do you see this? Let me make sure I point something out. A female does not have a Y chromosome. A female does not have a Y chromosome displaying a female, though the male may look like a certain way in a certain culture, and a female may have a look like that person of the certain culture because of the families and whatnot. We also got to make sure we're giving good information, that we're not putting a female on a chart that we're talking about Y chromosome. That's where we're making confusion that what if that female, you don't never know what, you just seen it, right? L group, I can show you, you can go to Facebook and you can look at the L group and you can see all types of different colors. All types of different colors. You can see all types of different colors with all types of different peoples. We gotta make sure we also know Y chromosome are males, X chromosome are females, and it's complex. You gotta look at fossils to get an understanding of the thing. So with that, family, be blessed, be beloved, and amen.